Okay, welcome back. I'm going to do some drums today, but I want to first of all do a bit of tidying up and introduce you to some of the systems that I use for my tracks. First of all, color, and if you hit Alt-C, you get the color menu, and they've expanded it in Logic 10.3. There used to be just 2 rows of these colors, but now there's 4, so you can have 4 different shades of brown. I use a brown to identify my bass lines, so I'm going to make that brown. Kick drums I keep red, leads I keep yellow, and side chains and things that you don't hear so much, and also for effects for some reason, I keep them like a light blue or a cyan kind of colour. And yeah, that's it. It just helps me identify things. In fact, I might make that yellow a bit brighter. And when you've got lots of these sounds all going on at once, and you create groups and stacks and groups of sounds, then to have them all color coded I just find it visually pretty useful. Now, one of the first things I want to do before I get onto the drums, that side chain that I added in a little while ago, which, as you know, is being sent to bus 1. Put a compressor on the bass line, and I'm going to connect the side chain to that compressor. It's not too crazy, it's just subtle, it's just allowing it to kind of duck under the kick a little bit. And you will also notice that I've made slightly different pattern variants on these bass lines. So if I just show you this, that's a slightly simplified version. It's called V1, and you can right click and rename regions, which is also a useful organizational tool. V2, which you might be able to see, just has a slight change on the transition or the turnaround. And then V3 has 2 changes, one here and one there. And it just gives us a bit of variety, especially when we get into arranging the track later on. Now I also want to talk about the kick drum, because I've changed that up a little bit as well. I wanted to get more of a kind of classic Lindrum feel, so I've changed some of the envelope, some of the sound. I've kept the kick hat too as the click. If I just isolate the kick drum using solo, you'll hear that now. It's a more electronic sound. It doesn't have so much of a live drum tail or click, a synthetic Lindrum kind of sound. And the reason for that is I want that kind of 80s vibe, you know. I want space for the bass and space for the synths. I added a compressor just to glue it together a little bit, but I'm going to put in some EQ on this kick as well. I just want some low mid. Yeah, just about there, I think. Just pull it back a bit. And it could probably use a bit of low end boost as well. And I'm just going to add in as well a low cut. They used to give you individual high cut, low cut, low shelf, etc., but it's all one plugin now. Oddly enough, if you've got legacy from Logic exist and still appear as they used to. But if you're introducing a new one, then you get this kind of combined interface. The reason I want the low cut is, again, for arranging later on. There's going to be times where I'm going to want to fade up the kick drum, up the frequencies. Okay, so that's a bit of housekeeping. And let's now look at some percussion stuff that we can add in. Okay, so the first thing I want to add in is probably a tom. So I'm just going to create a new track, software instrument. I'm going to use one of my favorites, which is not RetroSynth. Thank you, mouse, for not doing what I want you to do. Ultrabeat. Let me just right click to create an empty MIDI region. I use the command L to extend my regions. And I want to make that half the length because I want a certain kind of tom pattern. Now, one of the great things about Logic 10.23, or 10.3, I should say, you get all the different instruments now listed on the keyboard, which is actually really helpful. So I'll just take this low tom sound just as a guide for now. I'm going to want to put one there, maybe one here. I'm just going to quantize them. It's pretty good, but I've got this techno tom that I've been working on. If I take the lead out, in fact I'm going to take the bass out just so you can hear the groove. That's quite low. There's a lot of got a lot of low around 100 hertz in that sound. So what I want to do is bring out the mid. You can probably hear the noise in that as well. So maybe if we do a bit of a high shelf, it'll just give it that bite in the mix. I'm going to increase the bell curve. Really around 500. It's often an area where if you're not careful, a mix can kind of fall down and get flabby, and using a tom in the groove and accentuating these kind of frequencies is a really good way of combating that. But I don't want it to have too much low, so I'm going to take out some of the lows using a low cut. Okay, that works. And just so you're introduced to my colouring scheme, yours may be different. For percussion and drums elements, I use blue. Next thing I want to put in is probably some kind of a clap. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to add in a software instrument. And this time I'm going to use the EXS24 sampler. Find. This is a sample pack released years ago, actually, by Ramon Tapia. You may know, pretty famous kind of techno tech house artist. And I like his claps, so I'm going to use one of those claps here. And do the thing again, extending it out with L. Something, I'm just going to increase the BPM before I forget. I want it to be a bit faster, around about 124. This clap sounds okay, but it's a bit dry. So the first thing I'm going to do is compress it quite quite aggressively. I'm going to use this FX compression, which you have to be careful with because it is very aggressive. Let's bring the threshold up so it doesn't bite quite as hard as that. The release down. I want to take away some of that hollow sound. First of all, adding in some enveloper. Just shortens the envelope of the sound. Not quite that much. And then I'm going to add in something which isn't stock, but I like it, so I'm afraid you're going to have to deal with it. This is called BT Valve Driver, and it's from Nomad Factory, and it's a few years old, but it's like a valve driver, and it's from the Blue Tubes pack, and it makes everything kind of sound more organic and warm and, you know, valve distortion sort of stuff. Open up the frequency range. So I've got a basic clap in there, and that gets colored blue. You know my system. So okay, so we're building a basic groove. I'm going to move on to the next video, and I'm going to add in some other percussion elements and really try and get this drum boss built up.